Okay, today's lesson is on graphing linear inequalities, and we're in day one. The materials you will need are a straight edge graphing tool, an ID card or ruler work well, also a pencil. If you're a student in my class, you might have received a worksheet that will allow you your guided notes that will allow you to fill in your guided notes. If you're at home or if you're not one of my students, feel free to write these down on another sheet of paper. You'll probably need some graph paper as well. The essential question that we're talking about is how can I graph an inequality, know what type of line to draw, and know where to shade the graph. And by the end of this video, I hope you have all three of those questions answered. Let's start with some prior knowledge. We have already graphed one variable inequalities. So when you saw x is greater than 3, the way that we graphed it is you had an open circle and an arrow heading to the right in this situation. There's another one. You could also have seen x is greater than or equal to 3, in which case the greater than or equal to is a little bit different from the greater than, and the graph looks a little bit different as well. Instead of an open circle, we had a colored in circle. Okay? The symbols, we're talking about our symbols now, the symbols that gave us an open circle are the greater than or less than symbols when we graphed. The symbols that gave us a colored in circle were greater than or equal to, but also less than or equal to. Now, the greater than and less than symbols are going to have an impact with the type of line that we are drawing or graphing with our linear inequalities. So let's go back here and figure out what type of a line. And some of you probably already know this. When it says x is greater than 3, we had an open circle because the point 3 was not included in the solution set. So the open circle is going to match kind of with our line in that it's going to be a dashed line, not fully complete. For the type of line for our greater than or equal to or less than or equal to symbols, it was colored in. And so now our line for those types, the greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, those are going to be solid lines. The boundary line. The boundary line part is we're talking about this line. Now, if it is on a dashed line, it's similar to an open circle, and our points that are on this line part of the solution set. Just like 3 in our original inequality was not part of the solution set here, the points that are on the boundary line are not going to be part of the solution set there. For the boundary line for our greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, the points that are on this line are going to be part of the solution set. The boundary line is part of the solution set. So all points that are on this line are going to be part of the solution set. All points on the dashed line or dotted line are not part of the solution set. The next box we have down here, we're going to talk about shading. You're also going to need to shade the graph. So not only do we have to draw a line and figure out dotted or solid, we're also going to have to figure out how to shade the graph. In order to shade the graph, we're going to use a test point to determine which side of the line to shade. And we're going to give you a couple of examples later where we are going to show you how to pick the test point and which I feel is the best test point to use. Let's talk about a test point, one more piece. A test point is any point that you select to figure out where shading needs to occur. Okay, so if I'm going too fast, what I want you to do is to pause the video and copy down all that information, and then we can move forward. All right, so here's our first example. It says graph the inequality y is greater than 1/2 x minus 4. In order to graph this inequality, we first have to identify our m, and our m is 1/2. We also have to identify our b. Our b is a set of coordinates, and it's 0, -4. Now the line, next piece of information is we have to figure out what type of a line we're going to draw with this. We always look at the inequality sign, and it says y is greater than 1/2 x minus 4. Greater than, if you refer back to your notes above, tells us that we're going to have a dotted line. So now we can graph this. So we find our b, and we plot our b at 0, -4. And then we're going to follow our slope, our m, up 1, right 2, another point, up 1, right 2, a third point. And now we've got 3 points and we can draw our dashed line. The last part that we have to do is we have to figure out where to shade. And the way we're going to figure that out is using a test point. The test point that I always like to pick is 0, 0. I like the origin. I like it for two reasons. Mathematically, it's the easiest one to do. And if you always pick the same one, then you never have a problem. And there's very few times where you can't use the origin, and we'll get to those in a moment. So the way you use a test point is you take your 0 for your x and your 0 for your y, and you substitute them into the original inequality. So instead of y is greater than 1/2 x minus 4, you substitute in your 0 for your y and your 0 for your x, and simplify. What is 1/2 times 0? It's 0, and 0 minus 4 would be -4. 0 is greater than -4. Now, the reason why we did this is we have to figure out if this statement is true. Is 0 greater than -4? Yes, it is. So therefore, what that means is this test point, the origin, where my cursor is facing, and every other point on the top side of our line is going to be shaded. Now, one thing I want you to recognize as you're looking at this is, do you see these white pieces that are above the line? They should all be shaded. So as you're graphing, make sure you shade all those. And you don't have to color it in really dark, but make sure you get a good, solid coloring. Okay? Again, if you need to pause for a second, go back and review and watch, feel free to do that. I'm going to go on to the next example. The next example says y is less than 2x plus 1. So again, we're going to identify our m, 2/1, identify our b, 0, +1, and identify what kind of a line we are going to draw. It says y is less than 2x plus 1, so we're going to draw a dotted line again because of the less than inequality sign. In order to graph it, we are going to start with our b. Our b is 0, 1. And then we're going to follow the slope up 2, right 1, plot a point. And then we can go, instead of going up 2, right 1, we can also go down 2 and left 1, and down 2 and left 1 again. And then draw our dotted line that connects all of those points. And what test point are we going to select again? We are going to select, again, the origin. And the only time you cannot use the origin is when your line goes directly through it. That would be the only time that you can't use the origin, in which case you would need to pick another set of coordinates on this graph. So test point of 0, 0. We're going to substitute it back into our original inequality. 0 is less than 2 times 0 plus 1. Again, the reason why I picked that, 2 times 0 is 0. So 0 is less than 1. Which is true again. Yes, that's a true statement. So therefore, what we have to do is we have to figure out where our test point is. Now it's below the line, and we are going to shade the region below. Okay? Shade the region below. You have 2 more sets of coordinate planes. So what I want you to do is I want you to graph inequality y is less than or equal to -1/2 x, using a test point of 0, 1. And I want you to graph the inequality y minus 1 is greater than or equal to a -1/3 x minus 3, and use a test point of 0, 0 for those. And then answer the question at the bottom, is there a relationship between the inequality signs used and the location that it is shaded? Okay, try to think about and look back at the 4 examples that we've done and come up with a conclusion. If you have any questions, please go back and watch the video 2, 3, 5 times more, and then ask your teacher. Have a great day.